Hello everyone, it's time for another live look at the astrology. My name is Katie Sweetman, and this is your look at the astrology for February 23rd through March 1st, 2026. I had to think about it for a second. We had a lot to talk about last week, and we have a lot to talk about this week too, because February just in general is a big month for astrology. It brings us into a new time, and yet you've heard me say this probably the past few weeks. We're not at the beginning of the astrological year. We're actually at the end of the astrological year. So when the sun went into Pisces on February 18th, we entered the last astrological month. And yet, we have Saturn now in Aries. As of February 13th, we have the Pisces, not Pisces, we have the Aquarius solar eclipse. That was last week on February 17th. Everything happened on February 17th. It was like the eclipse, it was Mardi Gras, it was Lunar New Year, it was Ramadan. It was like everything was happening on that day. So it was like this convergence point. But it also opened up a 6-month chapter for us, and one that's going to be really lived through symbolically through the lens of Aquarius, which I spoke about last week. And when we are around the eclipses, in fact, this week we are between the eclipses. We are between the solar eclipse of February 17th and between the lunar eclipse of March 3rd. I had to think about it. My brain's still getting off of the weekend, but it's a little bit of an interesting time. It's energetically very liminal. It's where things are coming in and out during this almost vortex-like space. It's a time when events can happen. Of course, this is not going to be for everybody, but typically around the eclipses, it's like not a quiet time. Things are happening. Maybe things are happening in your life. Maybe things are not happening in your life, and we had a lot of potent energy in this solar eclipse, and the solar eclipse in particular activated last week's very rare, every 36-year conjunction of Saturn and Neptune. Again, that's a lot of stuff to resurface, so go back and listen to my introduction last week. And what I said to you last week, it's Pisces season. We'll need to push that off for next week. It's now next week, so we can talk about Pisces season. And this is also a week that we also have a Mercury turning retrograde in Pisces. We also have Mars square Uranus. That's kind of a big aspect. It feels in a way like a bookend between the Mars conjunct Pluto that we had on, I think it was January 27th, and then this one is Mars square Uranus. But this this square, which I'll get to in a few moments, it's actually activating the eclipse degree. So that's something that we need to talk about. So let's dive in. For those that don't know who I am, my name is Katie Sweetman, and I'm an astrologer and psychic medium located here in the rolling, cold, snowy, what's going on? Why is it still winter? Hills of Central Maryland. And every week we gather live to look at the astrology. You hear me say it every week. The astrology is 50%. You are the other 50%. So as I was saying in the introduction, we are in eclipse season. Eclipses, they happen every 6 months. So that period around, pretty much like a few weeks before the first eclipse and a few weeks after the eclipse, which can be about a month and a half period. It's this very potent time where, depending on our own personal astrology, maybe things are happening, because the eclipses in general, they mark the different moments and chapters and milestones of our life. And despite eclipses' reputation, it can even mark achievements, and look at the woman, Elisa Liu, that won the gold for the United States in the Winter Olympics. I think she's a triple Leo, and it's very common to see that people's star rise and even fall during eclipse season. So of course, eclipses can be achievements, it can be wins, it can be notoriety. Now we also have the Andrew, formerly known as Prince, who is also in the news for very different reasons. He's a Leo rising, and eclipses can sometimes really bring the events of our lives to a head. That's obviously a very different example. But for you, depending on what sign you are, the eclipses are acting a very particular part of your astrology. It could be career, it could be relationships, it could be health and wellness, it could be home. And so again, it really depends on what sign you are, and in particular, the fixed signs. So these are my Tauruses, my Leos, my Aquariuses, and my Scorpios this eclipse season. But the eclipses in Aquarius and Leo, these are the eclipses that are really activating these four signs the most, or the rising signs if you have your rising signs in one of those signs. So it's a big time, and like I said, we now have Saturn in Aries. We are starting, it's a shift of priorities for the next, that will take us into the next 2 years. It's a new cycle. 0 Aries is the start of the zodiac. We also, again, have Neptune in Aries. This eclipse cycle in particular is taking us into the next 6 months. So this will bring us all the way into the Leo solar eclipse of August 12th of 2026. What else we have going on? We also have, I mentioned it already, the Virgo full moon. We're actually going to have a lunar eclipse on March 3rd. So this will be the final eclipse in the series. I mean, not the series of Pisces and Virgo, but the series for this eclipse season. Sometimes, and it really depends, there will be 3 and maybe 4. I'd have to double check eclipses in one season, but mostly it's just 2. So this season we just have 2 eclipses. We have the eclipse on February 17th and the eclipse on March 3rd. Because we are a week and a half away from a lunar eclipse, the energy this week will start to build. Lunar eclipses have a very different energy than solar eclipses. If we go back to the solar eclipse of just last week, February 17th, 28 degrees of Aquarius, it plants a seed. Not everybody really felt the eclipse. Maybe you're scratching your head. It's like, I don't know what the big deal is, Katie. Nothing's happening in my life. But the seed is planted, and it may take different times for that seed to get activated. So very often Mars is an activator, because Mars, it activates, it inseminates, it can push us to take action, and Mars will get to 28 degrees this week, so the same degree as the solar eclipse, and this will be roughly around this weekend. But that's not to jump ahead too much into the Mars-Uranus square, but sometimes we need to get into another planet activating that degree. So at some point over the next 6 months, whatever this eclipse season is about will reveal itself to you. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It could just sort of push a very particular part of your life to the forefront. So this eclipse in Virgo, a lunar eclipse typically is more event-oriented. It can sometimes prompt us to take action, to make decisions. And in a way, this eclipse connects to the solar eclipse we had in Virgo back on September 21st. And that eclipse, if we went back 6 months, said that for a 6-month period, all the way till February, we really needed to focus on Virgo. Virgo was the primary lens for a lot of our experiences, putting things in order, cleaning things out, precision, paying attention to the details, systems, service, how we serve and how we show up for other people, the health and wellness of others, and including our own. Virgo, of course, it's about organization, but it really is a sign that talks about how our day-to-day lives run. And so maybe we needed to really look at how we're organizing our day and where we're putting our time and what's truly of a focus and priority, for example. So that has shifted, and now it's about Aquarius, and Aquarius is also systems like Virgo, but it's the systems that run our world, our community. Our world can be our community, the place that we live. It can be our country, for example, or Aquarius can be humanity, society, and the collective. So that is a much bigger lens to focus on for the next 6 months, all the way until August 12th of 2026. But a Virgo full moon, it has a sense of immediacy. A Virgo full moon lunar eclipse, it says we need to take action. We need to really look at something, how we're showing up, how we're handling our responsibilities and our duties, our sense of attention to detail. There's a sense of perfection with Virgo, but I really like the word refinement when it comes to Virgo, because perfection can sometimes get into an ego place where it's like, oh, it's not good enough, I didn't work hard enough, or even projecting that onto somebody else. But if we are seeking to refine ourselves or to refine a situation or even to progress it, it's a very different relationship with the energy of Virgo. For me, the eclipse is on my Saturn, so I'm just like, oof. Even though I love Saturn, I love Saturn, eclipses are still eclipses, Saturn is still Saturn, so I'm just like, great. But that said, it just means that I need to really do my Virgo over the next couple of weeks. And for all of you, even if you're like, but wait a second, I'm not a Virgo, Virgo is an energy and an archetype that is present in your life because you are the zodiac. The zodiac is around you. You need to take care of yourself. You need to show up on time. You need to put things in order. You need to clean things out. That's a Virgo. Virgo's a lot of other things, but it's a couple of the major points in Virgo. So we will talk more about this lunar eclipse next week. It will be again at 12 degrees of Virgo. Good segue into the Mercury retrograde that we're about to have, because Mercury, the ruler of the eclipse, will be in Pisces. It will be retrograde, and so we really see again that push and pull between Virgo Pisces. We saw that with the eclipse in September. Virgo is our earthly lives and Pisces is our spiritual lives, and so it's the tension between both. It's heaven and earth, and needing to find the balance point between the two. It's Pisces season. I didn't forget, the sun is now in the last sign of the zodiac, and so when we reach the end of the zodiac, we don't just reach the end of the astrological year, we reach the end of a symbolic journey that has taken us from sign to sign to sign. Aries is the starting point. It is the I, the self, the individual, the power to take action, the desire to know what we want and to go after it. It can be a sign of leadership. I realize there are other qualities to Aries. This is not so much about the sun sign as more as the energy and archetype of the sign. And here we are, we've gone all the way to the end of the zodiac. Pisces is not the individual, it's not the I, it's not the self. It's about not the collective, because that's Aquarius, but it takes us beyond Aquarius. It takes us beyond our world and what we can sort of know and intellectualize, and it opens our dreams, it opens our intuition, and it is a sign that's ruled by Jupiter, and Jupiter is its traditional ruler. And Jupiter, because it sort of has that duality with Sagittarius, also ruled by Jupiter, but the answers to life through Sagittarius come externally. You read them in a book, you get a degree, you travel the world, but the answers through Pisces come from within. So we reach the end of the zodiac and we reach a very existential sign in a very existential place. And Pisces asks us, what do you believe in? What do you stand for? What is the meaning and purpose of your life? What have you done over the last 11 months? And so there is a need for reflection, for integration, for searching ourselves, for getting quiet, so that we can come to some sort of realization, hopefully, and then start the cycle over again when the sun goes into Aries on March 20th this year. And so it is a time to reflect. It is a time to go within. It is a time to transcend beyond our physical world hopefully without losing our connection and our grounding. That's where Virgo really pulls us back. It sort of acts as the counterweight to Pisces, because Virgo is an earth sign. And Virgo is so much about our day-to-day life. And Pisces is, well, what's beyond this world? Why am I here? And of course, these are very, again, existential or even subjective questions. And it could be a season that you really tap into your intuition, for example. Pisces as a sign is a space that we have really marked our territory over the past few years. And if you've been around the block, watching me on these videos or even reading the things that I write, Saturn was in Pisces from March, I believe it was 7th of 2023 to February 13th of 2026. So just a week and a half ago. And that period, Saturn is always our lessons. It's always our long-term priority. We really have to work on Pisces as a collective archetype and energy. Of course, that corresponds to something in our own astrology, but that was our collective work over the past few years. Neptune was there, although Neptune was there from 2011, 2012, all the way till 2026. But those two planets have left, and now we have the North Node, which will eventually leave Pisces in July. But the North Node is still saying to us that part of our evolution right now, personally and collectively, is Pisces. It is to search ourselves. It is to find compassion and empathy. It is to rise to a higher level. It's not to leave this planet. It is to still be very much a part of it. But how do we shift our relationship with it? Pisces always reminds me of something called the overview effect. It's something that's been studied where astronauts, they go to space and they spend some time in space, and you spend enough time looking at Earth from above, you begin to have a radical shift of consciousness. Suddenly you don't see the separateness of humanity or even the separateness of nations. You see something as a united whole. And so Pisces invites us to view something as a united whole, not as its separate parts. So we have the North Node here. We will have one more eclipse in Pisces, although this will be at the end of August, but it still represents a space that we are being pushed towards with the North Node in Pisces. This Pisces season, we do have the energies of the season pointing over towards Jupiter in Cancer. Jupiter is in the sign of its exaltation. It just reminds us that Jupiter does its best work in Cancer, the sign of emotional connection, memories, home, family, roots, a sense of belonging. And so if Jupiter is the planet of quote-unquote quote growth, meaning Jupiter is a planet that makes us want more out of life, that Jupiter can really truly do its best work in our home environment, or really trying to work on having a greater sense of family and connection. I realize family is very often a complicated word. It doesn't have to mean your biological family, but it is a season to really make deeper connections with people and to form familial-like bonds with people, for example. Also, we have again that Mercury retrograde. So what I wanted to say earlier is, since Pisces is an area that we know, we've done a lot of work in the past few years, and so perhaps Mercury turning retrograde on February 26th, so just in a few days, it will turn retrograde at 22 degrees of Pisces. And as it goes back, it will go back all the way to 8 degrees of Pisces, and it will turn direct on March 20th. Perhaps we need to review something from, say, 2024 and 2025. Because Saturn was at 8 degrees of Pisces in February 2024, and when Saturn got all the way to 22 degrees in, I think it was like March of 2025. And so maybe we still have some unfinished business in a sign that maybe we're like, great, Saturn's out of Pisces, but maybe we need to go back. Maybe we need to see things from a different perspective. Maybe we need to make different choices. For me, and maybe I'm not the only astrologer that thinks this way, or perhaps it's unique, I don't know, but I see retrogrades as karmic. Karmic in the sense that it brings us to the past. It wants us to look at something that perhaps is unfinished, or we need to make a different choice, or we still need to integrate a deeper lesson, perhaps. So yes, Mercury will be retrograde. I'm not the astrologer that tells you to duck and cover during Mercury retrograde. Life goes on. Maybe you're late to work. Maybe you lose your keys. I don't know. But Mercury retrograde is an invitation to slow down. It's a reminder that life cannot always go at our time and our rhythm, and it cannot always go forward, because the tide goes in, the tide goes out, and eventually we need to rest, we need to integrate, we need to listen. And a retrograde is energetically, symbolically a yin phase. The energy goes from active, forward, to receptive, backwards, or retracing its steps. So if you follow the Mercury retrograde, if you follow even the shadow period, it's not going to be, I think, until April 8th or 9th until we get out of the shadows. So this is for those that do care about Mercury retrograde. Your fair warning: do the things that you need to do. Don't worry, it's all going to be fine. But maybe you need to slow down. Maybe you need to make different decisions, or maybe you need to go in a different direction. I think more importantly, because Mercury is in Pisces, technically not a sign that it's at home in, it's in what's called its detriment, but maybe we need to listen a little bit more to our intuition. In the modern world, we're so much in our heads. We don't listen to that inner voice, that quiet voice, the nudges. Sometimes we get all the information we need in an instant, and then we don't listen to it. Maybe don't trust that person, or maybe this is better for you. It's again, Mercury is not at home in Pisces, but that's just because Mercury isn't running on the analysis of Virgo, the sign that Mercury is home in, or even the information of Gemini. It's actually running on its intuitive voice, its faith, Jupiter, its desire to know what's beyond this world. And so that's something that we're all going to have to reconsider over the next few weeks while Mercury is retrograde in Pisces. Lastly, Mars will square Uranus this week. So since the end of January, I think it was the 23rd of January, we've had Mars in Aquarius. And at one point, we had a lot of planets in Aquarius, Pluto in Aquarius. And we had that Mars-Pluto conjunction on January 26th. And by now, Mars is at the end of, or almost at the end of Aquarius. And when Mars gets to 27 degrees of Aquarius, which it will this week, it'll make a square to Uranus. Now, if we go back to that eclipse that we had on February 17th, it was at 28 degrees of Aquarius. So Mars will be 1 degree off of this solar eclipse degree. And that solar eclipse made a pretty strong square to Uranus in Taurus. And it says that over the next 6 months, there is an energy of reinvention, shakeups, doing things differently, seeing things from a different point of view. And Uranus can help us make a break from the past. So Mars will be activating the square to Uranus, this eclipse, a square to Uranus. Uranus will, just as an aside, it's at the end of Taurus. It'll leave Taurus in April 25th. So this is kind of, in a way, the last hurrah of Uranus and Taurus since May 2018, March 2019. That's a whole other topic. But it might make for some spicy astrology at the end of this week going into next week, before we will have the lunar eclipse on March 3rd. On March 2nd, Mars goes into Pisces, so we'll save that, of course, for next week. But Mars square Uranus is typically very provocative. It can be a little bit rushed, sometimes accident prone, but at its core, it's trying to get us to transform and reform and awaken how we take action, for example. So that is the astrology of this week. What day is it? March 23rd through March 1st, 6th, 11th. Like, what year is it? What day is it? March 1st of 2026. I can't believe it's almost March, but here we are. Let's look at each of the 12 zodiac signs, starting with Aries. So Aries, Mars is your planet. And since I think it was January 23rd, Mars has been pointing towards Aquarius. So this has been a 4-week period for you to really focus on friends, community. Maybe it's larger social issues, social causes, but on some level, Mars has been trying to point you towards the future, to look outside of yourself, to hope, to dream. It's been complicated at times because Mars has been occupying the same space as Pluto, although that was earlier in the month, even later in January. But Mars has been saying to you, what do you want? Where do you want to go? Who are your friends? Who are your community? What's truly of importance and of value to you? Mars, before it can leave Aquarius, which it will on March 2nd, so next week, it makes a square to Uranus, and it also activates the solar eclipse degree. In general, over the next 6 months, your 11th, Aquarius is going to be a big focus. The eclipse sort of pushes it to the forefront. And it may be a 6-month period where it's about your relationship with either friendship or community or social issues or social causes. And so maybe as you go into this weekend, Mars is activating the eclipse degree and pushing forward just what I said. It might be different for your own life. You have to sort of listen for, where our friends or community or larger issues or social causes or systems or even science and technology, like how is that a focus in your own life over the next 6 months? But I'm kind of jumping ahead to next week, but Mars will go into Pisces, and then you will begin this period that takes you into April 9th, where it's about rest, going within. We're not there yet. But I will say Mars square Uranus this week, which will be exact on the 27th, can really push you to make a break with the past. Uranus has zero sentimentality. And if we go back in time, we go back to the fact that Uranus has been in your second sign of money, income, material stability, and security since way back in May of 2018, March of 2019. This is sort of coming to the end of a bigger period of your life where you've needed to really reshift your relationship with value. That could be monetary value, that could be value on a larger level, that could even be self-worth and value. But that's been at the heart of a bigger change and transformation for Aries. It is Pisces season. It is the season before your birthday. Typically, it's time to rest. It's time to go within. And with Mercury turning retrograde in your 12th, there is some aspect either about listening to your intuition, making sure that you are seeing things clearly, really connecting to your higher self, your higher wisdom, or even resurfacing. We've talked about this so much in the past few years, the fact that you needed to do a lot of inner work and release a lot of things, 2023 to February 13th, 2026, that maybe there's something that is unfinished. Taurus. So Venus is your planet, and Venus is presently in Pisces, the sign of its exaltation. But Venus in Pisces also means that you are beginning to come to the end of your personal year. Venus is never too far from the sun, give or take. That's a separate conversation. The sun will, of course, get into Taurus at the end of April. We're not there yet, which is kind of weird to think that it's actually not that far away, but Venus is leading the way. Venus right now is in your 11th sign of friends and community, society, humanity, social issues, social causes, and maybe it's a time you really are looking towards the future, or you're looking towards the world, and it's about issues that are not personal, because this is a part of your chart that's not personal, it's collective. With Mercury retrograde over the next 3 weeks, there is some aspect of your friends, your community, your social circle, or social issues and causes that you need to sort of rework or go back to. I said this to Aries, I will say this to the rest of the signs. This is the same exact place that Saturn was for 3 years. Maybe there's something that needs to, even though Saturn's moved on, maybe you need to go back to something that you were really working on about friends and community and society and humanity over those past few years. Of course, this is going to be specific to your own life, so you have to sort of look at your own life and sort of see how your life fits into that part of your astrology. That said, we are just a week and a half off of a solar eclipse, was it a week and a half? It's like a week off of a solar eclipse. I don't know what day it is, of a really very powerful solar eclipse in something called your 10th sign. So your 10th sign is your public life, your public reputation. It is your professional life. It is your career. It is responsibilities and duties on a much bigger level. And that is an area that's getting pushed to the front for the next 6 months. And I want to say that because I want to keep putting it on your radar. And Mars has been in this space. It's been sort of creeping up on the solar eclipse degree throughout the end of January and throughout February. And the end of this week, Mars will get to the solar eclipse degree. So it's just to sort of see what is happening either in your professional life, your public life, your sense of maturity and responsibility, the role and title that you play in the world, and how maybe that is beginning to shift, or there's a personal milestone. It could be a job shift. It could be a shift in the direction that you want to take yourself. And Mars is a relationship, but Mars is a planet that is making a square to Uranus this week, and it's trying to get you to do things a little bit differently, Taurus. Gemini, so Mercury is your planet, and it is going to turn retrograde on the 27th, and that's not a big deal. And you know the drill, Gemini. So every 3 months, your planet turns retrograde. It just reminds you that life cannot always go forward. It has to slow down. It has to not go backwards per se, but it's a sense of retracing your steps. Gemini on its own, it's like do, go. And so the retrograde gives a chance to reflect, to think, to go inward. And this retrograde in particular is going to be in something called your 10th sign. So overall, Mercury will spend 2 months in your 10th sign. Your 10th sign is your career, it's your public life, it's the title after your name, it's the duties and responsibilities that you carry in the world. It's also your maturity and responsibility. And this is the same space that Saturn was in for 3 years. Saturn has moved on as of February 13th, but maybe there's something that's either unresolved, unfinished, or you need to sort of look at it from a different point of view, because Mercury is resurfacing this space. So Mercury turning retrograde until March 20th says there's something that you need to either walk back on or retrace your steps on. It's going to be specific to each person. It's you have to sort of listen for how Mercury is spotlighting this part of your life, your career, etc., over the next, not just 3 weeks, but the next probably 6 to 7 weeks, for example. We just had an eclipse. This eclipse wasn't sort of hitting on the big marks like it is for some of the other signs, but it is sort of in general spotlighting a part of your astrology that is about what do you believe in, what do you stand for, what's your truth, what's your conviction, your sense of right and wrong, your education, your curiosity about the world. And that's going to be a bigger focus throughout the first half of 2026. But I do want to spotlight, even though it's next week, and we'll come back to this, that there will be a Virgo lunar eclipse. Virgo is something called your sign of home, family, roots, foundation, past, memories, ancestors. And having an eclipse in this space, you did have an eclipse in this space in March of 2025, can sometimes talk about a change in your living situation. It could be a move. Somebody moves in, somebody moves out. If it's not a physical move, it's a time to really focus on the home environment. It could be a renovation. It could be changes in the household. If it's not that, it's not your address. It could be something about family in general, or even our inner sense of home and belonging and putting down roots. And so it's just not quite a quiet time in Gemini's astrology. And then again, and I'm really jumping ahead, but you probably already know that Uranus is going to be going into Gemini on April 25th. And that's a bigger story. We talked about this last year, but it is not a quiet time just in general to be a Gemini. It's just larger changes on the horizon. This last eclipse that will be next week is really showing and spotlighting that there's still some more shifts and changes in your home environment to come. Also, I will say there is a Mars square Uranus this week. It's not really touching on your astrology in big ways like it is some of the other signs. It's more about, again, faith, truth, meaning, what do you believe in? Both what do you believe in because that's what a book tells you, or what do you believe in because that's what you discovered within. Cancer. So the moon is your planet. How are you doing, Cancer? We just had that solar eclipse, and a solar eclipse is the moon passing in front of the sun. And so just as a Cancer in general, you feel things, you feel the energies. That's just a part of your sign. And so this solar eclipse on February 17th, it highlighted a very particular part of your astrology. It's something that I call the 8th room. Aquarius is your 8th sign. The function of the 8th sign in anybody's astrology is to get us to look within. It is to create a space of personal alchemy and transformation on an emotional level. It can bring to the forefront themes about trust, vulnerability, power, control. It can also talk about money and a need for security on a financial level, but the real currency and the real wealth of the 8th is the wealth that we gain from doing the work within. I wanted to put that to the, push that to the forefront, even though the eclipses are pushing that to the forefront for the next 6 months, is because Mars is in this space. Mars has been in this space since the end of January, but Mars this week, as it comes to the very end of Aquarius, it'll make something called a square to Uranus. So it could be an emotionally testy week, and maybe there's something actually positive and productive about that, because one of the beauties of one of the sides of Uranus that I actually think is very helpful is that Uranus helps us to make a break from the past. So if there's something that you're still holding on to on an emotional level, then maybe Mars square Uranus this week on February 27th gives you the chance to really make a break from the past. That said, what else do we have going on? We do have the Mercury retrograde, so Mercury will be retrograde in Pisces. It is Pisces season. Pisces is something called your 9th sign. In general, the 9th sign sort of asks us, what do we believe in? What do you stand for? What do you think is true? It's one of the spaces of education in our astrology, travel, exploration, but it's also philosophical. And what it believes in, what it stands for, is often something that is discovered externally in a book, in traveling, for example. Now, Mercury retrograde in this space, Mercury is turning retrograde in a space that Saturn occupied for the past 3 years. So this is a general area of your life and themes that are very well worn for Cancer. And maybe with Mercury retrograde, you need to retrace your steps. You think you believe in something, you think you're right, but maybe Mercury is saying it's time to look at something from a different perspective or to reconsider something. Maybe we all have unfinished business with this Mercury retrograde. If there is travel, there may be a need to sort of have some plan Bs or to have some grace to take your time, because sometimes Mercury can make things a little bit chaotic while traveling. Not always. But I think on a deeper level, this gets into your beliefs, the sort of the frameworks that sometimes we can get a little bit stuck in. And how do you see things from a different point of view? Let me go back. Cancer. So Mars square Uranus. Actually, Mars is a big player in your astrology. It is a career planet, and Mars square Uranus, it makes the square this week on the 27th. It is a bit provocative. It is asking you to make a break from the past, not just emotionally, but actually to move on and to move on in the world, and maybe to take a different role. But that means to leave something behind. Leo. So the sun is your planet, and we are in Pisces season. So on one hand, that is the end of the zodiac. We are wrapping up the astrological year all the way until March 20th. And Pisces for you is something called your 8th sign. So every time this year, the sun brings you into a space that is designed to get you to transform. As human beings, we're not meant to be static. There's a sense of ego and self, and when we get into the 8th, it is time to strip away the ego. There is positive ego, there's self-esteem, a healthy relationship with ourselves, but that's not the 8th. The 8th says it's time to strip away the veneer, it's time to strip away the personas that we've created, and to really get into the truth of who we are. To be fair, the 8th is a space where Saturn occupied this space from March of 2023 until February of 2026. That is a bit well worn at the moment. You have done a lot of emotional heavy lifting in the past few years. Maybe you've really questioned yourself or reconsidered yourself, or maybe you really prioritized Saturn, your emotional growth and transformation. but it was heavy. But maybe there's still some loose ends. Maybe it's to really gain a different point of view. I say that because Mercury will turn retrograde in the space on February 26th. It'll be retrograde until March 20th. It'll occupy the same space that Saturn occupied from approximately February of 2024 until March of 2025. Maybe there's events that we need to go back to. Maybe there's loose ends, conversations. The 8th is where we truly look at ourselves and we look within. And with Mercury retrograde being Mercury retrograde, sometimes people can pop up from the past, or there's information that comes to light, or maybe it's just that light bulb that you really need to go off. So suddenly things can come together, things can make sense, and maybe you can truly move on. We will have Mars square Uranus this week. That's actually kind of a big deal for Leo, because Mars is a planet that rules your home environment. It's your roots, it's your foundation, it's past, it's memory. So it's really sort of connecting to this deeper emotional and psychic material that the Mercury retrograde and Pisces season is already tapping into. So with the Mars square Uranus, Uranus is in your career sign. Maybe it's time to really let something go, and that's the real push to leave the 8th. And so it's about the new beginnings, especially in the second half of the year for Leo. We've got Jupiter in Leo at the end of the end of January, the end of June. We'll have the eclipse in August, so you get more of that fire energy in the second half of the year. And maybe this is that last big push, Leo, to truly prepare yourself and to prepare space for a potentially very different life in the second half of 2026. Virgo. So Mercury is your planet, and Mercury, it's in Pisces. And so just in a couple of days on February 27th, Mercury will turn retrograde at 22 degrees of Pisces. So in general, when your planet, Mercury, is in your 7th sign, Pisces, it's time to focus on relationships. Relationships come in a lot of different forms, but perhaps you are in a committed partnership, perhaps you just have major relationships in your life. It doesn't have to be something romantic, but as human beings, we're not islands. We need connection, we need relationship. And so Mercury retrograde is saying you need to retrace your steps. You need to have conversations that you haven't been having. You need to see things from a different perspective. You need to lean in more into asking for help and receiving it, because sometimes Virgo can take everything on its shoulders. And I've been saying this for the other signs, and it's just to remember that Saturn was in Pisces from March of 2023 all the way until February 13th, so just I think a week and a half ago, 2026. And Saturn in this space, that was a long time for Saturn to be. Typically, Saturn is in one sign for 3 years. And relationships is already a space that you've done a lot of heavy lifting in. Whether you needed to really work on existing relationships to build connection, to build committed relationship. Again, it doesn't have to be romantic. We're not meant to do life alone. We have to really form connections and social bonds. And maybe it is about, a serious relationship over the past few years. And with Mercury turning retrograde, because retrogrades do have an element of the past and karma, there is something that needs to be, loose ends that need to be tied up, or going back and seeing something from a different point of view, because Mercury will retrace the same path that Saturn made from February of 2024 until March of 2025. And it's just to, in your own time, reflect, like, what was going on? It's roughly 13 months. What was going on in that 13 months? Is there something unresolved? Is there somebody that I need to reconnect with? For example, have I truly learned and understood the importance of relationships in my life? That said, we do have Mars square Uranus this week. It's not pressing upon your astrology in the way that it is like the other signs. So I don't think it's going to necessarily, you'll feel it. I think it's more touching on themes around the self and individuality, but also your health, your wellness, the projects that you're involved in, the work that you do. And Mars is always about, or rather Uranus is always about making breaks from the past, reinventions, and doing things very differently. But what I do want to highlight for you, Virgo, is that you will have a lunar eclipse in Virgo on March 3rd. So that's just right around the corner. It's just putting a lot of spotlight on Virgo just as a general whole. There will be one more eclipse in Virgo. I just want to put this on your radar. This will be in February 2027, the next year. And so this, whatever is happening, it's not isolated. It's part of a story that's been unfolding possibly since 2024. We had an eclipse in Virgo in March of 2025. We had a solar eclipse in Virgo in September of 2025. It's all connected. It's all part of this arc that's in your life. So it says that it's a dynamic week. It's a dynamic March. Things are happening, it's pivot points, and if you have major planets or your rising sign at or very close to 12 Virgo, it's probably major things that are happening in your astrology. With some, really depends on your personal astrology, but you're in the spotlight right now, Virgo. Libra. So Venus is your planet, and as you may or may not know, Venus presently is in Pisces. So I think it's next March 6th, so next week. It's kind of weird to think that that's next week, but March 6th is next week, and Venus will go into Aries. So right now, and Venus typically spends 3 to 4 weeks in one sign. It's been in Pisces for the past few weeks, and that's your sign of health and wellness, your work, your projects. It's Pisces season as well. And so maybe it's just kind of busy for you, busy getting things done, putting things in order. We don't think of Pisces always as a busy sign, but Pisces says to Libra, whatever you do, your heart has to be in it. It's about really being intentional with how you take care of yourself, how you take care of your life. As part of your astrology, love, ritual, craft, practice, for example. Mercury is going to turn retrograde in this space. This will be on the 27th of February, so later this week. And I wanted to mention that because if you think back the past few years, Saturn was in this space. And this means, or has meant, different things to different Libras. For some Libras, it very much was about health and wellness the past few years, and whether that was to make changes in your health or to make changes in your diet and fitness, or even to clear things in the way that you run your day-to-day life. So Saturn has moved on. It moved on February 13th, just a week and a half ago, but Mercury is there, and Mercury turning retrograde is resurfacing this space. And to me, as an astrologer, Mercury retrograde has a karmic element. It says that there's something that from the past that we need to go back to, we need to reconsider, we need to tie up loose ends. And it's possible that these loose ends are from approximately February 2024 to March of 2025, because that was the time that Saturn was at the same space, 8 Pisces all the way to 22 Pisces. So listen for what this means for your own life. You know your own life. If it's health, or if it's your work, or if it's projects, or it could even be service. This is a part of the astrology that also talks about how we serve and how we show up on a day-to-day level. And for some Libras, because Libra is the scales, you do put a lot of people first sometimes, and maybe this retrograde is also to reconsider the balance of relationships and how you put things, put people and situations in your life. That said, it is Pisces season. We are just coming off of a solar eclipse. The solar eclipse was in your 5th. In general, this is a 6-month period that's really pushing to the forefront bigger questions about the self-expression, identity, who are you? And maybe with a lot of the back and forth with the retrograde, it's just to reconsider how you are showing up. Lastly, Mars will square Uranus this week. Mars is a major planet in your astrology. It is your relationship planet. Square to Uranus is a little bit of a testy aspect. It says something about the relationship has to grow and evolve. Uranus is very unsentimental. There's a need to break free or to break free from the past. You typically have Mars square Uranus twice in a cycle, so this is not unfamiliar energy, but it just might make things a little bit testy as you go into next week, just in time for that lunar eclipse on March 3rd. Scorpio. So Mars is your planet, and Mars this week is making a pretty big aspect to Uranus. So let's rewind a little bit, and I know that we've talked a lot about this over the past, 6 years. I've been doing this live since, not this live, but lives in general since June of 2019, so we've had a lot of time to talk about this. But you've had Uranus in your 7th sign of relationships since May of 2018 and March of 2019. And over this time, and this means different things to different Scorpios or Scorpio risings, how you do relationships, how you connect, how you relate, and how you socialize with people has needed to radically and fundamentally change. That is one of the rules of Uranus. And so before Uranus can leave, because Uranus will leave on April 25th, maybe Uranus is saying to you, Scorpio, what have you learned? And it's even to some degree, it's to look back and to reflect on how relationships and how even socialization, how you socialize with people, how you connect has changed over the last 6 or so years. But that said, Mars making a square to Uranus, Mars is in something called your 4th sign. It's home, it's family, it's roots, foundation. Mars spends 6 weeks in one sign of the zodiac. So this has been since January 23rd. It's been more of a time to go within and to focus on the home environment, to make changes in the home environment, to spend more time with family, to hide out. I don't know. You have to sort of listen for what this means for your own life. But Mars will turn, it will change signs next week on the 2nd of March. It'll go into Pisces. But whatever is happening, it's between you and relationships. It's between relationships and family, your family relationships. It's also your relationship with your past and memories. And it might be really pushing on a few buttons this week. It is Pisces season. Pisces season is something called your 5th sign. It's a time for you to get back in touch with who you are, to do the things that light you up, that give you joy, that give you passion. And do keep in mind that this is the same exact space that Saturn was in from March of 2023 until just this past week and a half ago, February of 2026. And Saturn was saying to Scorpio, it's time to take yourself and take your talents seriously. That meant something specifically for you. It's not universal, but with Mercury turning retrograde in this space on the 27th, and it will be retrograde until March 20th, maybe you need to go back to something. It could be a creative project. It could be a larger question about self and individuality and how you express who you are. Because Mercury says there's unfinished business. There's some loose ends that need to be tied up. And that could be either the cherry on top or whatever metaphor you want to use to this larger time that Saturn was in Pisces. And Saturn was at 8 Pisces and to 22 Pisces from February of 2024 to March of 2025. And those are the degrees that Mercury will resurface during its retrograde. We are coming off of we still are in eclipse season. We are coming off of a solar eclipse that we had in Aquarius. It says that something about the home environment or family or your inner sense of home environment and family will change over the next 6 months. And Mars reaching the eclipse degree this weekend is just something to observe. It's not to expect, it's just to observe. But in general, there will be points throughout the next 6 months where family as a general whole will get pushed to the forefront. Sagittarius, so Jupiter is your planet, and Jupiter, it's still in Cancer. It'll be in Cancer until June 30th of 2026. So overall, this continues to be a time to really do your inner work, to go within, to get into bigger questions about the past and memories and legacies and inheritances. And with it being Pisces season, it really brings the spotlight to home and family. It's the part of your astrology that really holds up your chart. I realize family is very often a complicated subject matter, but this part of your astrology reminds everybody, not just Sagittarius, but the bottom of the astrology reminds us that we need roots, we need foundation, we need a place to call home. Of course, we should be so lucky. So Pisces season, but in particular Mercury retrograde from February 27th until March 20th, Mercury is resurfacing a part of your astrology that Saturn occupied from 2023 to 2026. Maybe there's still something that needs loose ends tying up. Maybe there's a lesson that still needs to be integrated or a choice that needs to be reevaluated. Mercury is both a relationship planet for you, so it's relationships in general or relationships within the family structure or how family past and memories have influenced relationships in general. Mercury is also a planet that talks about your career and responsibilities and duties, and maybe it's about the duties and responsibilities that you have in the home environment or to your family, for example. So again, Saturn has left, but the story isn't over. Truly, it's never true. It's over, but we have something that we need to go back to and to tie up some loose ends while Mercury is retrograde into March 20th. What else? So Mars is square Uranus this week. This is not pressing upon Sagittarius' astrology like it is for some of the other signs, but it does make for some testy astrology. This is activating the solar eclipse that we had on February 17th. This is in your third sign, voice, communication, how you think and listen and learn. And so maybe you have things to say this week. Maybe with the square to Uranus that you are not necessarily being a diplomat, you're not holding back. There's a need to change how you communicate, how you express yourself, but it could be a little bit of a testy energy as you get to the end of this week. Capricorn. So Saturn is your planet. And as you know, we've had about a week and a half of Saturn in Aries. And so this was a big shift of your astrology. It begins to put the energy of your sign into the base and foundation of your astrology, into that second quadrant, if we're getting really technical about it, of your astrology. And it's pushing you into a part of your astrology that's more about other people. How are you feeling this? Are you like, nope, I don't feel this? Or yes, I sort of symbolically or emotionally or psychically feel that things are pointing in a different direction? Top line Capricorn, it says that for the next 2 years until April of 2028, your priority is home and family. That's a very broad subject matter, and of course for a lot of people it's complicated, and it doesn't mean that you need to have start a family or settle down, but you are in a part of your personal astrology where it is more focused on your internal life and to make those connections. And so maybe one Capricorn makes a big move and they really settle and put down roots in a new place, and maybe for another Capricorn they've got a family member that needs attention, or maybe they need to take care of a family member, or maybe for another Capricorn who is in a very different phase of life, they're starting a family, they're starting that part of their life. But it could mean something very different for you. To some degree, Saturn is asking you for the next 2 years, even though you are a Capricorn, where is home and who is home? At some point, you need to figure out what the answer is to those questions. That said, it is Pisces season. Pisces season takes you back to a sign that you really spent some time in, Saturn in Pisces from March of 2023 until, February 13th of 2026, so just a week and a half ago. Your voice, how you speak, how you listen, how you communicate. This part of your astrology, just basic level, is also educational, and maybe it's time to take classes, maybe it's time to learn something. And education in general may have been a priority for you over the past few years. Education, not just to take workshops, but with Saturn in that space, you need to really take it to the next level, to really perfect something. If it's a language, you need to really learn the language. If it's a skill set, you need to really learn the skill set. And Mercury will be retrograde in this space from February 27th until March 20th. And so with Mercury retrograde, it's possible that you need to resurface this space. You need to go back, something that was started or unfinished or needs to be reworked from a different point of view, whether that's around education, whether that's around voice, maybe that's even around the choices that you have been making. But Mercury is bringing you back to the space to see things from a different point of view. But that said, it's still a sort of a different time in your astrology. We will have what's called Mercury square Uranus this week on the 27th. Mercury is a big planet for you. It is your planet of home and family and roots and foundation. Mercury right now is in Aquarius, your second sign of money and income. It could also be assets and the things that you own. But with the square to Uranus, it's a bit of a testy energy. It could be getting into something about the home environment and the things that you own. But in general, Uranus is a planet that's trying to get you to make a break from the past. Capricorn, you are an earth sign. You typically dig your heels in, you do things the way that you know them, and if this week is telling you anything, it's to do things from a very different way. Aquarius, so Saturn is your planet. So let's check in, Aquarius. How are you sensing these big changes in the astrology the past couple of weeks? Because now your planet, Saturn, is in Aries. It'll be in Aries for the next 2 years. Even though you are Saturn ruled, even though Saturn symbolically represents you, it says that your priority for the next 2 years could be education. You're taking classes. You're really, in a very Saturnian way, you're building your skill set. You're taking things seriously. It could be voice and communication. You're really working on language. You're working on writing. You're starting a manuscript. It could be the choices that you're making, really taking seriously the choices that you are making and learning, maybe hopefully, to make better choices. But that is your general priority over the next 2 years. However, it is Pisces season. Pisces is something called your second sign of money, income, material stability, and security. A space that is very well worn at this point because this is the same space that Saturn, your planet, was from March of 2023 until February 13th of 2026. Mercury will be retrograde in this space, your second sign, from February 26th until March 20th. And I wanted to highlight that because it is possible that there's some loose ends that need to be tied up. It could be something about money. It could be how you earn a living and maybe making changes in that, or maybe it's the things that you own, the assets, and maybe, again, needing to see things from a different perspective or choose things differently. But there is a bigger sense of really resurfacing a larger question of value and worth, what's truly of value and importance to you. But I feel that the big focus of the astrology this week actually is that solar eclipse that we had last week on the 17th, because that solar eclipse at 28 Aquarius says, to some degree, you are at the forefront. Your life is at the forefront over the next 6 months. Eclipses often plant a seed. We don't see them right away, but it's very important, Aquarius, to take note of what is happening right now. What are the conversations that you're having? What are the events that are happening in your life? Because they could be part of a bigger story. Now, you've had Mars in Aquarius, your sign, since I think it's January 23rd. And Mars, it is coming up to the end of Aquarius. And Mars, typically when it's in your sign, it sort of pushes you to take action, to lead, to move forward, to know your desires. Mars is not a diplomat when it's in your sign, but Mars will square Mars will square Uranus this week. And it's a little bit of some testy energy. My dog just sat down and shook the screen. It will be some testy energy as you go into the weekend. Mars square Uranus can be a little bit rushed and, dare I say, even accident prone. So don't rush. Really be mindful of your steps in general. But Mars square Uranus is trying to get you to make a break from the past. There's the Uranus has been in your sign of home and family roots and foundation since 2018. So whatever's happening, I feel it's part of that bigger change with the eclipse. It is activating the eclipse energy. It is talking about this need to, again, break free, to find your freedom, to find your individuality. And that's going to play out in some specific way in your own life. Finally, Pisces. So Pisces, Jupiter is your planet, and Jupiter, it's still in Cancer, will be in Cancer until the end of June of 2026. So the energy of your sign points over towards a sign that talks about, on one hand, family, home, past, memories. It's also emotional connections and emotional bonds. It's a water sign just like you. And I've said this a few times already in past recordings, but I really truly feel that Jupiter in Cancer has been a time for you to get back to you. To be a Pisces over the last few years has meant that you've had Saturn in Pisces, you've had eclipses in Pisces, and it's just been a lot on your sign. I think Saturn in general, although Saturn has moved on, it was a lot of heavy lifting over the past few years. And so maybe Jupiter is exactly what you need and to get back to the things that light you up and give you joy and give you passion. But let's go back to Saturn. I know you're like, nope, let's not go back to Saturn. It's just a reminder that Saturn, it has left Pisces, but we will have a Mercury retrograde starting this week on the 27th until March 20th of 2026, so the next 3 weeks. And Mercury is going to resurface the same space that Saturn was from roughly February 2024 until March of 2025. Mercury is a very important planet in your astrology. It governs your home environment. It is a relationship planet, and in fact, you will have a lunar eclipse in Virgo, your relationship sign, on next week, March 3rd of 2026. And maybe there's something that you need to go back to. Maybe it's a loose end. Maybe it's a different choice. Maybe it's seeing things from a different perspective. Maybe it's having a conversation that you weren't able to have before, or maybe it's something unresolved with a relationship or something with home and family. But Mercury will be retrograde again until March 20th, and that represents space that you need to recover, to look back on, to, again, see things from a different point of view. But don't forget, Jupiter is in Cancer. It's about to do it from a place that really fulfills you and feels in alignment with a bigger sense of meaning and purpose. We just had an eclipse in Aquarius, your 12th sign of spirituality, inward, going within, shutting the past, letting go, really working on your spiritual connection. And I sort of want to push that to the forefront because the eclipses are really pushing that to the forefront for the next 6 months. This Mars square Uranus that we're having this week, it's not pressing on your astrology like it is some of the other signs, but maybe to some degree it is activating these bigger existential and spiritual points in your astrology that are getting very activated with the astrology of the eclipse. But it could make for some testy energy as we go into the weekend. So that is your look at the astrology of this week, February 23rd through March 1st of 2026. So believe it or not, we are beginning to come to the end of the astrological year. It's we're kind of getting further into 2026. But I thank you all. You can follow me online at empoweringastrology.com. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Spotify, I'm on YouTube. You can sign up for my newsletter, and you can even book a consultation with me so we can really see how this big astrology of 2026 is unfolding in your own personal astrology, because it's always deeper and more intricate than it is, listening to just your sun sign. But you can go to my website, empoweringastrology.com, and I will see you all next week, just in time for a lunar eclipse. Take care. Bye-bye.